oh, that person, no, that's not true. Okay, they don't have to believe it, but there are tons of other people that will agree with what I said. And we go with that shared reality because majority of people agree and believe in that thing. That's kind of how you see gender, right? Majority it isn't until someone comes and says something, I identify, I'm non-binary. They're freaking out for a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons is we share a shared assumption about gender, that there's two genders. That's what we believe. So when the third gender or the fourth or whomever or non-binary, identified as either, comes into play, that's when it gets that's when the tension happens because you're asking someone who believes and internalized something and then it's reinforced by everyone around them that this is the reality and now you want to bring a different reality. That's what they're meaning by a concept of reality. I don't know how to comprehend what you're saying or what's being said and what I understand reality to be. Okay? That matters. Keep that in mind. All right, so race. Race does not exist. Now, pause. Is my skin brown? Yes. Is my hair a certain texture? Certain, yes. Do I say certain words? Absolutely. But race isn't real. Now, pause. All of those things are real. So when they're talking about race not being real, we're talking about how do I say this? We're not talking about the things that make up race not being real because they are. We're talking about how we organize certain things to mean certain things. So when you see me, you don't go, oh, she's Caucasian. No, you wouldn't say that. You would say, in your mind, it's a very quick process. Oh, her skin tone, her accent, her hair, that tells me that she's Black. My accent, she's probably African American. You see? So the meaning that you put on all of those things, that's the social construct. The meaning. Not that these things, not that my skin ain't real, not that my hair's not real. It's that these real things are grouped together. And now there's an understanding that everyone shares, or majority of people share, about those things. So majority of people say she's African American. Period. Here's a great example. When I was in high school, there was a young man. He's actually a famous poet now. His name is Rudy Francisco. That looked just like me, everybody else. Yeah. In my high school, most it's called Southwest. It's the most southwestern high school in the United States. It's that like 5 miles from the border, real talk. We actually had a list that they pulled so that when we had Black History programs, all of the Black students would be able to come. Whatever. 77 of us, up 2,500 students, there were 77 of us. And his name wasn't on the list. And we're like, Rudy, why wasn't your name on the list? He goes, my dad doesn't believe we're Black. But I'm sorry, what do you mean? He said, I'm Panamanian, but I grew up here. I said, oh, okay. He was like, and my father doesn't believe that we're Black, we're Panamanian. I said, yeah, well, Panamanian is a nationality. He says, I know. He said, so when my dad registered me for school, he did not check Black. He checked Hispanic. I said, well, yeah, they're Hispanic Blacks. Yeah. I'm like Puerto Ricans, Dominicans. He said, yeah, I know. He said, but my dad didn't check Black. So conceptually speaking, the way in which he saw himself, actually, which is ethnicity, he's referring to his ethnicity and his nationality, and not necessarily paying attention to his race. So racially speaking, yes, you would be classified in the US as Black. But he wasn't on the list. But again, shared assumptions about reality. So there are a lot of groups, folks from places like the Dominican Republic, that will fight you tooth and nail about calling than Black because of what socially within their society, what it means to be Black. It is a negative experience. They may look as quote unquote Black as me, but say, I'm not Black. I know. Some will say that the reason their skin is dark and that their hair is a certain way is because of their Taino Indian ancestry, which do a lot have that history. Those were the individuals that were there before the Spanish came and brought the enslaved Africans to the Dominican Republic. So they were there, yes. So the culture there is a mixture generally of those who were from Spain and Portugal, those who were from places in Africa, and the Tejano Indians. So it's all three. Now, the amount for each one can differ, and so, because the amount can differ and a lot of families have an array of colors, you will often have people based on the history of the treatment of Black peoples or people referred to who refer to themselves as Black within their country, they will refer to themselves as something else. Panama will be considered a part of the Caribbean as well. And so the history there makes for a trial will calls for a different understanding of what race means to them. Okay, to keep that in mind, race is a grouping of people who share physical or social qualities into categories. Remember, think social constructs are organizing to help people make sense of their world. I look at you, you are a girl. I look at you, you are a student. I look at you, all of those things help me to understand my world. The categories generally viewed as distinct in society. By the 18th century, the 17th century, which is the 1600s, the term began to be associated with physical traits and locations. I'm about to blow your mind. Before, I would say like 1600s, for real, race was not a thing. No one would refer to themselves or even really use the word race. They refer to themselves based off of the kingdoms that they were from, kingdoms, empire, locations, groups that they were part of, clans, things of that nature. Um, but yeah, not really. Now, they may refer to the location itself for real, like Africa. There are a couple of different iterations of the word Africa. One comes out of Arabic. Um, I think that's Afrique. I think Afrique. I can't. I gotta spell it. But there are a couple of others, and it basically was hot. It means hot wind from the south. Yeah, that's where the word Africa comes from. But anyway, but people will be associated with location, but not necessarily race. Okay, this is why I tell people. I don't know if anybody saw the movie Woman King, where you had groups in Dahomey, that's in West Africa. They were one of the biggest groups that would kidnap and sell the bondage of other ethnic groups within West Africa. So you hear people, Black people enslave Black people too. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, so they would do that. But the thought was, well, but why would you do that to other Black people? Pause. You'd have to believe that Black existed when in reality you're just another group. Because remember, race is the grouping of very large groups. There aren't very many races. Okay, those who are Hispanic, that's an ethnicity underneath whiteness. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there aren't very many races. A lot of ethnicities, but not a lot of races. A lot of nationalities, meaning American, English, put something in front. That's nationality. But in terms of races, there are a lot of races. And so if you have no race, you're thinking what? Ethnicity. The clan you're part of, the group you're part of. Well, you ain't a part of my group. I don't care how close we live together. What does that mean? If you live next door to Canada, would it be in your mind to save the people in your neighborhood, the people that you know, the people you're tied to? Or would it be in your mind if you happen to live in, like, say, Detroit, Michigan, to go and save everybody in Canada if something were to happen? Not to say that you're not supposed to have humanity, I'm not meaning that, but ties to other groups would be first to the one that you happen to be a part of, and not necessarily someone who's in proximity to you. Because again, five 5 miles from Mexico, I promise you, I'm not exaggerating. Five. We used to go to Mexico to eat tacos. Five. Just chill, like nothing. I'm not saying that I have anything against Mexico. No. However, if you're asking me about my community, I'm not even saying my country. If you're asking me about a community that I have to be tied to, the people I have to be tied to, I'm not necessarily tied to those who were in Mexico beyond my own feelings about humanity. So I want you guys to get that in mind. Proximity or even phenotype, how you look, that ain't necessarily what they were thinking about in the 1600s, the 1500s. Okay. So keep that in mind. Ethnicity is a smaller group within a larger race. African Americans are an ethnicity in a smaller group in a larger race of Black African peoples, or sub Saharan Africa, or African, sub below, Saharan, the desert, African. So everyone below generally are darker skinned African peoples who do not have a necessarily a heritage that is mixed with or are phenotypically those from the Middle East, those of Arab descent. So yes, ethnicity includes language, culture, religion, history, traditions, etc., etc. So um, things like holidays and things like foods and things like etc. Now, can you see a connection between foods for those who are part of ethnic groups or ethnicities and the larger groups? Absolutely. So here's one. Gumbo. Gumbo. Gumbo is one. Don't know. Here's a good one. Jambalaya. Jambalaya is connected to jollof rice. Jollof rice is made, depends on who you talk to, because they feel like a certain way about who makes it the best, but it's made in a number of West African countries, including Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal. That particular style of rice and meat and fruits and not fruits, vegetables, etc., was transmitted, crazy enough, to Spain, but we'll talk about why later, and then to the Americas. And it ended up being an amalgamation now as to what we when we eat jambalaya. Gumbo, I can't remember the name of the other recipe. That's an African recipe, but I can go down the list. But there are a lot of connections. Church hats. Church hats are connected to West African headdresses that a lot of women will wear on special occasions. But I can go down the list, but just understand that ethnicity is smaller within something that is larger. Okay. Sex. When I'm talking about sex, I'm talking about sexual parts. Sexual parts that are usually used to identify male or female. Now, we thought of being biological, even you. Well, let me put my biology hat on. All embryos, later zygotes, are female. Mm-hmm. Every last one of them are female, and then develop into being what we know as male. So the ovaries drop, become testes. Y'all follow where I'm going with this. Clitoris becomes the penis. I can go down the list. Cool. So we thought of it as being biological. So either this or that. But in actuality, there's intersex, which would be having, we can go for chromosomes, but having some aspects of male genitalia and some aspects of female genitalia. So the possible development of the testes not dropping and remaining to be ovaries, but the developing of a penis. Yeah. Humans are thought of as having 2 chromosomes, and the chromosomes are usually what will tell the DNA, chromosomes are within the DNA, whether or not that particular fertilized egg would develop into a male or remain a female egg. However, there are some that have 3 strand chromosomes. Mm-hmm. So it isn't just as simple and easy as look at someone and, oh, that we're going to tell you what you are. So although we never thought about it, we assign gender at birth, or sex, not gender, excuse me. We assign sex at birth, but that may not necessarily be true. So that's what we're meaning by sex as a construct. But let me take it further. It's the assigning, but it is also the meaning behind the assigning. What does it mean to have someone who is identified as male? How are they? How do they experience society underneath that specific sex? Okay, so keep that in mind. So sex is considered to be biological, what happens within the body, or and gender is social norms based on behavior. So gender is girls, boys, women, men, ladies, gentlemen. So pause. Sex is male, female. Male, female. Let me blow your mind. Male, female does not necessarily mean human. Yes, I'm yelling. I'm sorry. I hear one more, because females trying to sound smart. It's actually pretty dumb. Male, female does not inherently mean human. What do I mean? There are male and female bell peppers. Dr. Matt, how do you know that? Like, how am I supposed to know? On the bottom of the bell pepper, there's either 3 knobs, so 1, 2, 3, or there's 4. Based on how many knobs there are, it'll be male or female. Male, female. Male bell peppers tend to have more seeds than female bell peppers. What else? Let me see. My phone. This plug is a male plug, and the insert is a female receiver. Seriously. That's how they're, yeah. Same thing with plugs that go into the wall. Okay. One is a male plug. That's the plug that is, can't remember the term right now. But the receiver is often the one with the holes, i.e., female, i.e., women. The proper way to refer to humans that are female is woman, someone over 18, girl, someone under 18, lady, someone in a particular social setting. The proper way to refer to a male that is human is a man, a boy, a gentleman, etc. Whatever you use connotes a particular construct. So when you call someone a boy, if they are young, you are referring to their young, immature, etc., whatever. But if you call a man a boy, you are also making a particular point by calling someone who is clearly over 18 a boy. When you call when you refer to someone else as female, you are saying something too. I'll put you this way. You are categorizing them or summing them up based off their body parts. Yeah, I'm summarizing you based on your body parts. That's pretty much it. Yeah, keep that in mind. So when someone says they are non-binary, we know the term. We associate it with gender, but here's another moment. Non-binary, that word is not inherently about gender. The binary has all these things on it. Gender swapped the term to associate it with itself, but you can be non-binary about time. You can be non-binary about sex. You can be non-binary about race. You can be seriously. Yeah. We've been using non-binary before that term became associated with gender for a long, long time. So, how does one display gender? Pink for girls, blue for boys, right? Flowers and princesses for girls, trucks and skateboards and police officer outfits and guns for boys, right? Those types of things. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, time. How is time not binary? Think about how time is organized. Everybody doesn't organize time seconds. 60 seconds is a minute, 60 minutes is an hour, 24 hours is a day. That organizing and putting those titles, that's a social construct. Does the sun go up and the sun go down? Yeah. Does it matter if I call it the sun or not? No. That thing outside, that's hot, gonna go up and it's gonna come down. Or it's gonna be seen for a second and then not seen after a while. Those things are true. How we organize the time is the construct. So we use a Gregorian calendar. Well, there's more than one calendar. The Gregorian calendar is only one. That's the one we use. There's lunar calendars. There's a Arab calendar. There's a couple of others. Mayan calendar. I can go down the list. And we choose to organize our world based off the Gregorian calendar, based off of 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes within an hour, right? So if I say you have class at 2:10, you can't go to the lunar calendar or to another group and be like, what they say, I don't subscribe to time like that. Okay, cool. Well, this is where I'm gonna be, and this is where your grades at. Mm-hmm. You feel me? So yes, not time itself, but what we understand or believe about time, not gender itself, but what we understand and believe about gender, what we believe about sex, meaning you have a penis, so you're a boy, or you're a baby boy, or you're a male, etc. It's the belief, it's the names that we put on top of those things that help us to go, oh, so we both agree that right now it's nighttime. Okay, cool. Or better yet, it's not just both. Or better yet, our society agrees that it's nighttime. Let me mess you up. Daylight savings time. Daylight savings time ain't got nothing with nature. Ain't got nothing to do with nature. Daylight savings was proposed, and somebody was like, in Congress, we should do this so that it's not dark when our kids are going to school, or we should do this because yeah, that was really one of the main issues was we don't want it to be dark when our kids are outside waiting on the bus going to school. So let's just go ahead and put drop the time back, fall back so we get a little bit more light, or spring forward so we get a little bit more light during our day. That was a man-made construct. Man decided to do that. Now everywhere in the world don't do that. Everywhere in the United States don't do that. Arizona is one of them. But I say all that to say, our understanding of time manipulated by time, daylight savings time. Mm-hmm. Keep that in mind. All right, here's an actual real definition of racism. Racism. So remember, I told you racism isn't I dislike people from this group, therefore I'm racist. No, you're probably a bigot, but it doesn't mean necessarily that you're racist. Being racist means that the group that you are a part of can do this. Can the group that you are a part of do this? Can Black people work within whatever political structure is here to create a power structure of formal and informal rule, socioeconomic privilege? Do Black people have the ability to create a system that benefits them, i.e., credit scores? It's a part of socioeconomic privilege. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Basing where you go to school in terms of public school on the property tax of the area that you're in. The devaluing of the areas of Black and Brown people means property tax are lower, meaning that you have less money for schools. But making that legal that you have Black and Brown people who have been relegated to a particular side of town or to particular suburbs, they're relegated to poor performing schools because they have less resources, because the land that they live on is probably not theirs, who knows, and the taxes on that land is low. Low tax, low resources, low performance. Do Black people have the ability to do that to large group of people or several groups of people? Hmm? Help me understand. No. As a whole, no. No system has been constructed within the society. No, the society as a system, I'm going to say no system. Society as a system has not been constructed so that spoils or benefits would come to Black peoples. I'm not talking about affirmative action. No, affirmative action is the effort to right what the racist system within the US has structured already, right? This is reverse racism. No, baby. You've already constructed this huge building of racism, and we're asking for a bridge to get into the building. And you're saying, how dare you want a bridge? But you're benefiting from the ways in this particular system is structured. You structured it this way. And now you're upset because we don't want to live in said society. That's problematic. When they say formal rule and informal rule are laws. We're talking about segregation, Black codes, vagrancy laws, uh, postbellum apprenticeship laws. That meant right after enslavement, if a white person saw a Black child that wasn't being taken care of, which is a lie, they could go to the authorities, have that child removed from the home, and that child made to work on their land. What does it sound like to you? Enslavement. Vagrancy laws were if they saw a Black man and he didn't look like he was working, or he was you working to whatever level that they wanted him to, he could be reported to authorities, and his sentence would be, you guessed it, to work on people's land. Mm-hmm. You don't know about chain gangs, but chain gangs are a result of the 13th Amendment that says that basically slavery could be used as a form of punishment. So, what are chain gangs? Black men go to jail. Black men work on the chain gang. So they were building the railroad and doing things like that. But that happens now, sweetheart. Like right now, I could name you a number of organizations, companies that benefit directly from incarcerated members' labor. Think about it. Who's mostly incarcerated? Whose labor is being benefited from the most? In California, if you are an inmate, you can become a part of this elite group that you work as a firefighter, and they're putting out fires, getting paid nearly nothing, and none of their training can be used for them to get a job as a firefighter if they've done their sentence. As a matter of fact, they're restricted from being able to do that. They can't get those jobs. See what I'm saying? Okay, so high levels of arrest. I'll show you some other stuff on the next screen, but when we're thinking about what racism is, we're not talking about calling somebody Karen. We don't care about that. We're not talking about somebody, even, and this sounds crazy, but to some extent, even the N word. The N word perpetuates racism. It keeps it within the understanding of society, but it within itself, you disliking me because I'm Black, is only a tip of the iceberg when it comes to the effects and the impact of racism. Okay. Educational opportunities, pay. I'm not talking about random, unqualified person mad because they don't get the same money as someone who's qualified that happens to be white. I'm meaning if everything is equal from degrees to work experience, etc., systematically white men are offered more money than white women. White women are offered more money than Black men. Black men are offered more money than Black women right now. So they get a dollar on white men are a dollar for every dollar that white men earn. White women get 72 cents, Black men get 68 cents, and then Black women get like 63 cents, something like that. Okay. Oh, sorry. The Racial Contract. Whew, amazing book. It's thin. It's not that long. It's 100 something pages, but it's a dense book. And basically, Charles Mills, he's passed away now. I got a chance to meet him. He's wonderful. Basically, he argues that racism now may not be perpetuated or may not have been started by white people who exist now within society, but they're what we call benefactors. He says that when the foundation of the country was laid and when, the country was coming of age, there were signatories or people that quote unquote signed based off their actions, what we would call the racial contract that created this type of society of inequality, of structural inequality, social inequalities, etc. And then once they signed it, everyone after them perpetuated it and benefited from it. So even in 2024, there are white people, majority, who are benefiting from the structures and the agreements and the contract that was put in place by their forefathers hundreds of years before them. So while they may not be enslaving someone, of course not, it does not mean that they aren't benefiting from the enslavement of the ancestors of the people who right now are suffering via inequalities. They are benefiting. So signatories versus benefactors. Because you'll hear people say, I've never had a slave. Yes, we know. We get that. But it does not mean that you don't benefit from those who enslaved people, that your white skin and that your position in society isn't a benefit from those who enslaved people, those who use the labor of Black people to gain economically, those who continue to use the labor of Black people to gain economically with things like sharecropping. The Social Security used to not include occupations that Black people were pushed into, Black and brown people. Maids and domestics and drivers and butlers, they couldn't get Social Security when it started. Yeah, I go down the list. Redlining, all that stuff. You'll see it in a second. All right. So racism is these are four basic areas, but people have argued there are a few more, but racism is more than a slur. More than a slur. Institutional racism and in systemic racism, think stem from the beginning. Stem from the beginning. Systematic means more than one part of the system working together. Systemic means from the very root, from the very beginning of it. Okay? It says inequality is rooted in a system wide operation of society that excludes substantial numbers of a particular group. So, not just one or two. Don't look at me and say Oprah made it when I can turn around and say, but you are currently suppressing children that happen to be little Black boys who happen to have the highest number of new cases of special education when they don't necessarily need special education. Because what happens in our society when you're different from the quote unquote norm, you get treated differently and you often get less resources. So if there's an overwhelming number that are being pushed into that, then that means that there's an overwhelming number that don't have access to certain things in the society. Same difference with Black children who are suspended and have discipline records starting as early as pre-K and kindergarten. Those records go with them. They impact how they're treated, which impacts what they're taught, which impacts what they learn, which impacts their testing scores. By third grade, we already know whether or not they're going to be incarcerated. And those numbers by third grade school to prison pipeline are used by penal institutions to determine how many beds they need. That's systematic, right? That's not I feel like they just arrest a whole lot of Black people. Well, they absolutely do. And it starts as far back as when they're in kindergarten. When I say there, I'm talking about Black men. I'm a part of that statistic as a Black person. But specifically, they target Black women too, don't get it twisted. But specifically, the target is Black boys. Okay, so keep that in mind. Wage gaps, prison pipeline, mass incarceration. Remember, I said the second half of the 13th Amendment, the war against drugs in the late 80s and in the early the 90s, and how even now meth is a terrible problem and they need rehabilitation. They need all of these things, but there isn't a call to imprison them, just like there was to imprison people who were smoking crack. The reaction to society by those who are caught in meth is much different than those who are caught in crack cocaine. Crack cocaine was demonized. Those with meth, we have sympathy for. That's systemic, that's systematic. Money going to rehab and things of that nature for those who happen to be addicted to methamphetamines. Same thing doesn't happen for crack cocaine. What happened with crack cocaine? 3 strikes law. There's a generation of Black peoples, a nice generation of younger baby boomers and Gen Xers, which is like right before me, who were caught within the crossfire of the crack cocaine epidemic. Three strikes, you're out. You're in jail for 25 years for life, and you may have had a drug charge at the end or maybe in the middle, but if it happens three times, you're done. So keep that in mind. So systemic, applies to the system itself, meaning that the structure itself is racist. It started from a racist place. Environmental racism, Flint, Katrina, Cancer Alley, like I can go down the list. All of those things are public policy issues. And the thing that we're pointing to as being racist is the response by the government to those issues, right? The response to with Flint, oh, we know that this water contains a crazy amount of lead, but they don't pay their bills anyway. So we're going to switch it. Hurricane Katrina, yeah, we know that there are a number of people who can't get out, and this is a catastrophic storm, upwards of category 5. And we actually know the levees that were holding back the water. How do we know that they would break? The Army Corps of Engineers said this a month or so before Katrina happened. So we knew that it could happen if that type of storm came through, but we didn't do anything to the last minute. Cancer Alley, all of the refineries along the Mississippi River for oil are all near what areas? Black and brown areas. Smog. Inner cities tend to be hotter and have worse air than those of the suburbs. Inner cities tend to have less trees too. More trees would help to even out some of the issues with smog. Cultural appropriation, the Kardashians. Caricatures, minstrelsy. Some people say Dave Chappelle. Yeah. Microaggressions, slurs. What can Black people be? Black people can be prejudiced. They can be bigots. They can engage in bigotry, and they can engage in a certain type of discrimination. This type of discrimination, yes, I guess that's de facto. It's Latin, de facto discrimination. The type of discrimination that Black people cannot engage in is de jure, DE space JURE, de jure. De jure means by law. Black people can't create laws that systematically discriminate against a particular group. So think like I'm just saying Jim Crow to make it easy. There's tons now and whatever, but Jim Crow makes it easy. So Black people can't create things like Jim Crow and segregation that discriminate based on a particular thing. If you want to pull it up to sexual orientation, the laws that were created that were against gay marriage until the Supreme Court said that it was unconstitutional, that would be de jure discrimination. Okay, but please also believe when we talk about intersectionality, that's what she's talking about. She's how do I say this? She's saying that there are different aspects of people, different social constructs that intersect. So when there's oftentimes Black, let's just say Black women, she's a Black, right? She's a woman. Women are oppressed as well within a society. This is a patriarchal society. So Black women who happen to be gay, or Black women who happen to need special education, or who happen to be poor. Like all of those things intersect. So when I'm talking about discrimination with sexual orientation, are there white men that are going to experience it to some degree? Absolutely. But crazy enough, there are white men who are conservatives who happen to be gay or non binary and deal with some of the fallout that is associated with the complexity of discrimination and stereotyping, and we call it implicit bias, etc. Right? Because it wouldn't make much sense to you, but yeah, because oftentimes some of these laws and these policies are a 1-2 punch, right? Black boys, not all boys, but Black boys, right? So more than one group. Okay, if the person happens to be Hispanic and they happen to be in that place, they're Mexican, etc., they might experience it because they are Hispanic or because they are Mexican and they happen to be boys. You see, so keep that in mind. It's a little bit more layered than just one group. All right, we are part of Western civilization. Why do we need to know this? Because a major part of racism is the privileging of white culture. And white culture is often tied to or is tied to Western civilization. White culture within the US and in a couple of other places like the UK, Australia, and other places in Europe, etc. Western civilization. So I want you to think about it like Egyptian civilizations. So you know how papyrus and the Nile and agriculture and those types of things are part of that civilization, or Greek civilization, or Roman civilization. You follow where I'm going with this? Greek and Roman civilizations actually fall underneath Western, but you feel what I'm saying. So there are very particular ideas about life, about how life should be conducted. We live in America. We are underneath an idea of Western civilization. There are some that call we are under American civilization, which is a type of Western civilization. So Western would be here, it'd be Greek, it'd be Roman, be European, it'd be African, not African, excuse me, American, etc. Western civilization is tied to very specific ideas. Baseball and apple pie, that's American. What you call it? These tall tales about Paul, not Paul Bunyan, black, but they stole that. George Washington and Honest Abe and these kinds of things, right? There's Western philosophy, etc. But here's some of the concepts that are tied to Western civilization: democracy, capitalism, exceptionalism, individualism, etc. Individualism and exceptionalism are tied together. But basically, exceptionalism says we're better than everybody else in everything. It ain't true. Western civilization is not better in reading and writing and math. We're like 38 in reading and writing, like ELA, and we're like 60 something, 68 in math in all the world. But talk to some people from America. We're the best because it's a concept that has nothing to do with reality, really. Some based on some sort of reality, but this idea of being exceptional doesn't have to be necessarily true. Individualism. I pulled myself up by the bootstraps. You are alive from the very pits. You alive. Trump will tell you that, but he got $1 million from his daddy. $1 million. We didn't need no. I did this all my own. That's not true. One cornerstone of white identity within the U.S. is this idea of individualism, but it's just not true. Good old boys club, nepotism, structures that are already privileging them within our society makes them be able to say they did it individually, but you didn't. You absolutely didn't. Mm-mm. Part of the reason that people take issue with affirmative action is one, they just don't want people to be able to excel and move in certain areas. But they claim that it's giving people the opportunity to be somewhere that they didn't earn, which is not true. It's not true at all. But no one says anything about legacy admissions. Legacy admissions. My daddy went here. We gave y'all a building, so I'm going here. You don't have my grades ain't got nothing to do with it. You know, I don't do no community service. None of that has to do with how much money is spent. But nobody talks about legacy admissions. And part of the reason that they can say that affirmative action is giving everybody and anybody opportunities is because legacy admissions give everybody and anybody opportunities, just as long as your parents pay enough money and your parent happens to have gone to that school. Here's the binary. These are only a couple. But please throw away the idea that the binary is only about gender or it's limited to gender. The binary or this binary way of thinking is a complete aspect of Western civilization. Hot, cold, up, down, citizen versus immigrant, uh, white versus black, light versus dark, citizen versus foreigner. All of these things, either or, girl, boy, male, female. There's no middle. There's no space within there. There's no gray space. Now, in reality, we know that there's gray space. Have you not noticed about the West that reality is often different from what is said or what is put on other groups? Right? For we are exceptional. We're telling you so that you believe it to change your behavior. Doesn't have anything necessarily to do with whether or not we actually are. Okay? Good versus evil, right? Not to say that it does not exist, but we also know that there is space in between that. Very few things on earth it's actually all good, or very few things on earth are actually all evil, at least in terms of humans. Follow me when I'm saying that. But I'm saying that because this very stark difference is there in order to justify the treatment of all those who find themselves in categories like female or woman, poverty, black, down, left. There was a point where people would put, like my granddaddy's age, 80s, 90s, where they would put a pen or a pencil in the person's right hand, even though the person picks it up and naturally wants to write with their left hand. They would force them to write with the right hand because it was viewed as being wrong or superstitious for writing with your left. I say all this to say all it is for one side to justify the ill treatment and the disgusting views of those on the other side. Strong and weak. Women are weak and men are strong. That's why men should lead. That's why men should tell women what to do. At one point, only men could learn. They're the only ones who deserve education, etc. Women don't deserve education. They're emotional. They're this. They're that. Until they actually had women that were educated, they're like they are intelligent, but we're still treated as though we're not as intelligent as men. Real talk. But the point being is, this is justification for ill treatment. It's justification for discriminatory racist laws. It's justification for taking resources. Part of the reason that Africa was treated the way that it was, with its exploitation and its extraction of its material goods and its human capital, people, etc., was this thought of they don't know what to do with those resources. They aren't as smart as us. They're not civilized versus primitive. They don't have a God, or they have too many gods. They should only have one God. What's the problem with this? Whew, the first Christian church that was established outside of what we would now know as the Middle East was in Africa. Christianity was in Africa for 500 plus years. Yeah, before Islam made it to Africa. Mm-hmm. There were indigenous religions within Africa for centuries. Mm-hmm. Go down the list. But this idea, there were schools. One of the biggest learning centers was Timbuktu in West Africa. There was one in Alexandria too. It's where Pythagorean got his theory from. Real life. Go down the list. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I say all that to say reality ain't necessarily aligned with the way reality is being structured and understood for others. Remember what I said about social constructs. We have to share this understanding. We went in society, just think about it. Society was she, him, boy, girl. Not to say that those who were intersex didn't exist. They had to choose though. Their parents often chose. Okay. Not that there weren't people who didn't feel right in terms of how they expressed their gender, but they had to adhere because they were in a particular society where it was required. Now we're at a point where it isn't necessarily that very this or that. Uh-huh. Because reality doesn't necessarily reflect the box that we put those things in. These are boxes. These boxes are all social constructs that happen to be pitted against each other. Why does this matter? It matters because if you privilege citizens and you look very poorly or look down on those who are immigrants, then it translates into terrible foreign policy. And you justify to your public why you have that foreign policy. So that's why Trump could say that African countries were poophole countries, and very few people react. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can get rid of Roe v. Wade if you're able to look at women and to look at the health of women and the choice of women as being negative. John a little sick. Yeah, as being negative. Mhm. That men who have no anyway, just the stuff I read is terrible. But just think about it that way. The binary, how people feel, helps to justify the treatment of both sides, the privileges of both sides, right? The wealth, the opportunities of both sides. Okay? Keep that in mind. What's happening? Stop. There we go. All right, so this is where I just go over some of the names that Black people have called themselves here in the US, just some of the history behind it. African American is one of the newer terms. It was originated in the 1980s by the Reverend Jesse Jackson. He didn't create it, but he made it popular, okay, in his presidential runs. Afro American was a socio-political identification that Black people were using after the Civil Rights Movement around the 1970s or so, late 60s. It was tied to the Black Power movement and the Afro. The Afro is both a visual and cultural symbol, but it's also a political symbol. That's where you get the Afro from, an African American. Black American, I lowercase that Black on purpose because the Black in that sentence is supposed to describe the type of American. It's an adjective, not a proper noun. We are a proper noun. So there are some people who say Black American, and that's fine. You're telling me the type of what type of nationality you are. American is privileged, but Black is also the type of American you happen to be. Black, which is what I refer to myself as, encompasses more than just nationality. My identity is beyond America. My identity is tied to all of those of African descent that are dispersed and all over the world for varying reasons, including the transatlantic slave trade. Okay. And so the diaspora, the word diaspora means to scatter. Black diaspora describes the diaspora. There's a Jewish diaspora. There are a number of other diasporas. Okay. So the Black diaspora talks about the disbursement of Black people from Africa, but it's a disbursement of people from their homeland. We see Black used to describe people from Africa in white documents as early as I saw something like 1500s, 1600s, late 1500s, early 1600s. All right, here's some other ones. Colored was a legal term to describe those who were of African descent in the U.S., who happened to be the descendants of those who were enslaved. Negro is derived from negro, which is black, which means black in Spanish. The N word is derived from the Portuguese term Niger, yes, like the country in Africa. It developed into a racial slur, so Nigeria, Niger. Mhm. They're rooted. Nigeria is not an African word. Just to tell you that. Yeah, I know. Um, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. She's like, why? How did that happen? It was a British colony. British colony. When they decided to carve up Africa, okay, when I say carve up, where all of these European country heads sit down and decided which portion of Africa would be theirs, i.e., colonization. Um, a lot of the names were derived from them having been colonized. Mhm. Yeah. So much so that the dividing had nothing to do with the groups of people that were living in the region, but had everything to do with the group that decided that they would be under their particular rule. So there are groups, if I'm not mistaken, within Nigeria, there are a number of different groups, but some of the major groups include the Yoruba, which are in the north, the Igbo, which is in the south, and then the Hausa people are eastern, but I'm more concerned about the Igbo. There are people who are Igbo in Cameroon, not because they left Nigeria and came to Cameroon, but because the Igbo people, the entire space that they had, that they were actually living in and thriving in, encompassed Cameroon all the way to Nigeria. But Nigeria is a British colony, so they cut it off, and then Cameroon is a French colony, or was a French colony. So you have people who share the same ethnic group, but because of how they were divided, have different nationalities, and that's not the only group. That's it. That's it. We're done here. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Please, go ahead and check the what you call it. What you call it. Check the file section for this PowerPoint. And if you have any questions, I will see you guys later. Email them to me or ask me while we're in class. All right. Bye, y'all. See you later. Bye.